EAGLES, Eagles.
A good Monday, a football Monday morning, Johnny Mac. It's going to be mid-80s today, and we're coming off a fantastic draft weekend where the Eagles went to work, got some good players, made some good decisions. First time sitting in here on Birds 365. What an honor it is. Since we started this network, I've been working behind the scenes, and the fan base and the loyal listeners of Birds 365 have always been very strong. So it's a great honor to sit in here on Birds 365. John, I want to kick it right to you and just get your first recap, first reaction to what the Eagles did this weekend. I thought it was overall a pretty good performance. You obviously can't grade the players too much, but good performance from Howie Roseman. What's your first takeaways from the Eagles draft?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. I think my description of the draft, how I grade teams, is probably a little bit different than most people in the fact that I look at decision making, I look at how they handle the process, and that's what Howie's strength is. So everything generally makes sense, and even he talked pre-draft about things like the Hassan Reddick trade. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And you saw that after the draft yesterday with Mekhi Becton, how he mentioned at his post-draft press conference, he thought he'd have an offensive lineman earlier in the draft, and the board didn't break that way. So that's what he does best, the contingency plans, and all of a sudden you have a former number 11 overall pick to be your potential swing tackle. Obviously disappointed with the Jets, but you hope to bring him in. He's still very young. Jeff Stoutland, there's a reason he signed here. A chance to resurrect his career, and all of a sudden you might have that heir apparent to Lane Johnson if you get him back on the right track. So you go about things a different way. That's the strength of the Eagles. And they do it well. And they do it better than anybody else. And part of that is certainly Howie's experience and his learning on the job over the years. And not a lot of GMs with that kind of experience, not a lot of GMs with that kind of rope to do things the way he does things. And he takes advantage of it, and he deserves credit for it. He really does.
Yeah, Mekhi Becton, what will his role be? He's a massive dude, 6'7", 360. I know he didn't work out in New York, but they don't have Jeff Stoutland. So is he a swing tackle? Is he a potential depth piece, somebody that they can work on? Can he play the right side? Is he somebody that could?
Yeah, he played the whole season at right tackle.
Is it too far-fetched to think they could hold on to him for? He's pretty young. I think he's 26 years old. Is it far-fetched for them to keep him for a while?
And when the Jets got George Fant, they moved Becton to right tackle. So they drafted him to be a left tackle, obviously, but he can play right tackle. And he can do them both. And yeah, they want him to be the swing tackle, game day swing tackle, essentially as the backup to both Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. And we'll see if it shakes out. They have some other bodies. Fred Johnson, Tyler Steen can play tackles. So a lot of options, but what they gave him, and we'll see the deal. He got $5.5 million, but sort of like Devin White's deal, when you see it, it's going to look much more team friendly, and a lot of that is going to be incentives. But they did give him enough money to where you say, all right, this guy's in their plans, unless things go off the rails. So their hope is he's the swing tackle and sort of resurrects his career with Jeff Stoutland, and obviously he's got tremendous talent. Got a known for penalties, so he's got to clean that up. And certainly there's a lot of work to be done. But again, backup players, you're just looking for somebody who's got some upside, maybe some ability to hold down the fort for a game or two, and he certainly should provide that, I would say, for the Eagles.
Yeah, Johnny Mac, we had two good guests planned today on Birds 365. Jeff Kerr, who's obviously a weekly on JAKIB Sports, has been a big contributor to the network for a long time. And then Devin Jackson from the Inquirer, who had some fantastic breakdowns of the Eagles picks, even some of the late round picks. I thought he did some really good work. So we'll talk to him in hour number 2, get his breakdown. John, let's run through the draft real quick. I know they signed Becton, and we talked about that. Just what's your takeaways from some of the players they got? Obviously went defensive back for the first 2 picks, and then I thought some overall really good depth pieces in on day 3. I mean, we talked about it on the draft recap yesterday. You're not really looking for starters on day 3. It's a depth type of round, and if any of them turn into starters, it's a big win. But I thought they got some good players. I thought they got some promising players. I thought overall the Eagles did a really good job. What did you make of their draft and how it compared to other teams in the NFL?
Yeah, again, sense. That's what I graded on. I mean, it made sense, and a lot of teams don't. And I go to Atlanta first and foremost when I talk about that. A lot of teams make decisions that don't make sense. The Eagles make sense. I mean, look at Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the 5th round. There's a guy who was a heck of a college player, and obviously in Philadelphia, people love him, and people were talking about him to the Eagles very early in the process. And Jody, hat tip to Jody. He wanted him in the 2nd round. And you know, I go back to Taylor Hart during the Chip Kelly era. If people remember Taylor Hart, he was a Oregon guy, and Chip loved him, and he really wanted him. And you know, he wanted him in the 3rd round. And I was like, yeah, settle down. He'll be there. We'll get him. And they ended up getting him in the 5th round. And that's what Howie does well. He understands the value of certain players around the league. That's why he makes all the phone calls that he does. And all of a sudden, you got Jeremiah Trotter in the 5th round. The 2nd round, it's probably a bad pick, to be honest. Not probably. Right. It's definitely a bad pick.
A bad pick, yeah.
5th round, it's a damn good pick. And he's got the Eagles' probably weakest position as off-ball linebacker. You could probably take the word probably out of that. It is. And if he works out, he'll get an opportunity to probably get on the field pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, again, you matching up evaluation with valuation, all of a sudden that becomes a very good pick at 155 overall. So that's just one example. The one that stands out as a potential, maybe a little bit of an overreach, is Jalix Hunt in the 3rd round, because he's and the Eagles acknowledged essentially he's a project player, not going to be an immediate help. But Vic Fangio liked him. And the last time they went down that route in the 3rd round was Davion Taylor, and it didn't work out for the Eagles. So
yeah, our buddy Tommy Lawler did have a good breakdown on the comparison between those 2 players. And I know people like it's easy to draw the comparisons to Davion, but they are very different in the sense that Davion had religious reasons for why he didn't play the game. Jalix is an athlete. He's been an athlete for a while. He was a late bloomer.
Yeah, I'm not comparing them as the players. I'm comparing them as projects.
As the region.
I'm not a fan of taking projects until day 3. So, but you're talking about, again, and a lot of times those demarcation lines don't make a lot of sense because he was at the bottom of the 3rd round. And really, how much of a difference is that than the top of the 4th round? From a common sense standpoint, not much. And if the Eagles waited to 120 on the 4th round, they might not get him. So I understand why they went the way they went. I'm just personally not a big fan of project players until day 3. And that's, nitpicking. You try to find something.
Right.
I'm tired of giving Howie all his flowers. So I gotta push back on him a little bit. Yeah. And I think that was a little bit of maybe a little bit of a reach that early. Yeah, but if he turns out to be a great player, it turns into a great pick. but I'm judging the decision, and the decision, that's probably a 50-50 one.
When flowers are earned, Johnny Mac, they are given. Anyway, John, on Fridays of Birds 365, we obviously had a chance to recap and discuss round one. Quinyon Mitchell, where the Eagles drafted the cornerback out of Toledo. I want to get your take on Cooper DeJean. We didn't have a chance on Birds 365 to get into him specifically. He was Friday night's first selection at number 40 overall. Eagles moved up to get him. This is a guy that many were projecting in the first round. A lot of people even were talking about Quinyon or Cooper, who to take in round one. Eagles end up with both of them, both of those players. What do you make of Cooper and what he could be for this Eagles team?
Yeah, I mean, they had a first round grade on him. I don't think that was a difficult decision for the Eagles. Certainly, they had Mitchell rated above him, but if Mitchell was gone and the board broke a different way, that would have been one of the players they would have considered. Probably would have traded down a little bit, anywhere from 26 to 32. They had a first round grade on him, so they probably would have tried to manipulate a little bit. But who knows if he can. But getting them at 40 again, tremendous value, and that's why they go up, because they understand the market. And Green Bay was sitting there at 41 and immediately trades out because it's evident who they wanted, and that's why they traded out. But even New Orleans comes up at 41 and takes Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Right.
Houston at 42 takes Kamari Lassiter, and Arizona at 43 takes Max Melton. So you had that run of cornerbacks, Cooper DeJean. And by the way, he's more than that, or he can be more than that with his versatility, whereas those other guys are strictly corners, obviously. But again, it just shows an indication of how well he understands the process as a whole, and the teams around him, in front, behind, and he knew the corners were coming off the board, and he couldn't wait to 50 for Cooper DeJean, so he goes up and gets him. And it's probably the best example of this draft, because it's so obvious from what happened after that the corners were going to go, that Green Bay was going to take Cooper right there, and the Eagles wanted him, and they were able to get up and get him.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. And he talked about a raw athlete. He is a good athlete. There's a video floating around on social media of his high school basketball tape. Boy, he could play ball. I mean, he's one of those guys that is just put him in any sport, put him in anything with a ball, and he's going to play hard and play well. So he's a good athlete. I think he's a great fit for the Eagles. I love him for the secondary. I think he's going to really pan out.
Yeah, you see all those dunks. I mean, he's 6'1". And he's got such impressive explosion.
Yeah.
I mean, he dunks with ease.
Dunks the ball like he's 6'6". Yeah.
Yeah. Tremendous athlete. And he can fit in so many different spots, outside corner, slot corner, safety. I don't think he's going to be that versatile piece. I've said, a lot of people say, oh, Vic's going to move him around. I think he's going to put him in one position, but he's got a lot of choices as far as that one position and what that's going to be.
And that's a good player to have when you have a defense like the Eagles do, with a lot of holes. A lot of people were looking for a lot of new players, a lot of additions to the defense because of their lackluster performance in the second half of last season. So to get a guy like that, John, it's easy to, when we talk about the draft, it's very easy to get into the vacuum of the draft and grade each player and, oh, did they do good here? Did they do good here? If the Eagles get two defensive backs that make contributions to this football team in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, this draft was a success. All the other picks are icing on the cake if they got two defensive backs that can play as starters for this football team.
Oh yeah, I mean, any time you hit on your first two picks, pretty much anywhere,
Right.
that's going to be a successful draft. I mean, you could argue the Jalen Hurts draft, which is, it looks. Some people will say it's a bad draft. And certainly from the volume standpoint, it turned out to be a bad draft, but you got your starting quarterback.
You got your superstar quarterback who you paid $250 million. That's
that that you were willing to hand over $255 million to or promise to. And that to me is, that makes up for everything else. But I'm pie in the sky. You hope everybody hits, but that's not realistic. And, it might not be realistic for two of them to hit, but if one of them does, even that's good. That's sort of the nature of the NFL draft. And that's why Howie talks about that vacuum. And I mean, I get it. It's hard for people. It's hard for media people. So it's certainly hard for fans, and you have to rate these things and grade these things. And you look at each individual pick, and, perfect example again, is Mekhi Becton. I mean, all right, you didn't get the tackle. You got to go another route. And that's how you build good teams.
Another thing that's flying under the radar, John, and I like to add this context into the JAKIB pick in round 3. The Eagles added 3 picks in next year's draft, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of those picks came from the Eagles trading back twice. They moved 50, 53, jumped up to 40, but they added 78. Then they moved back to 84. Then they moved back in the 90s, and that's where they took JAKIB. They got 3 extra picks for next year's draft, which we all know Howie Roseman now, if you're a fan long enough in this town, he's going to turn those picks into something good. He's going to use them to go and get a player he likes late in the season if we need. I think that's an underrated part of this draft. You got the players and you got 3 assets for next year.
Yeah, and again, that's sort of knowing the board. They wanted a particular play, and they knew they could go down. Probably could have went down even further if they would have had a trading partner and still been able to get them.
Right.
Talked to Rick Spielman about that with Alexander Madison back in the day. He knew he wanted Alexander Madison in the 3rd round, and that was a bit of an overdraft, but he knew that's the player he wanted, and he went all the way down to the last book of the 3rd round and just kept adding picks. I forget, he went down like 3 times and just kept adding picks and adding picks and adding picks because he knew the player he wanted would be there. And I think similarly, that's what Howie did a little bit with Jelix Hunt. He knew he'd be there. And so he was able to manipulate that. And I mean, when you look at this draft and you get, it's almost absurd. They get the 9 players and they got 3 future picks, and they're a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th. So
right, they're not 7th rounders. A 3rd round pick is a pretty good. Third round is the most successful round in the history of the NFL draft. That's a solid pick.
Yeah. It's a premium pick. That's what, day 1 and day 2. And that's why the one thing I will say, all right, you can question Hunt a little bit because that's a premium pick.
Right. That's why I like to add that context in there. Did they reach for a player? Maybe. But did they also add a premium pick in next year's draft? Yes. That context is important to add.
Yeah. And we'll see how next year obviously unfolds, but it's probably going to be a deeper draft. That's one of the issues. Even when you talk about the undrafted free agents, he's ahead of the game because, he played the futures market in the offseason, and not a lot of people are talking about Julian Okwara or Terrell Lewis or Ty Davis Price. Those were all recent 3rd round picks. He added a tackle, Devin Kennard, who was a 5th round pick. And he mentioned that after the draft. This is the smallest undrafted class he's ever had. Part of the reason for that is NIL at the college level. Very few underclassmen declared, much less than normal. So that the pool wasn't as deep, and he was preparing for that, as he explained on that futures market that nobody cares about in the rest of the league. I'm talking about teams, and they're looking at practice squad film and trying to find players with upside, trying to win outside the margins. And by the way, the 6 guys they got, most of them are top of the top of the list at their position for guys who didn't get drafted. So, yeah, I'm giving him too many flowers, but he does a good job.
Yeah, well, a week projected day 3 class ultimately means there's less undrafted guys that the Eagles will target. That's why they were aggressive in the futures market. And we'll get into the free agents or the undrafted free agents a little bit later on in the show. Coming up next, though, is our man Jeff Kerr, a great contributor to the network, a great NFL writer, NFL reporter for CBS Sports. Jeff Kerr, weekly guest here on Birds 365, always does a great job. It would be interesting to hear what Jeff makes of the Eagles draft. So stick around, Birds fans. Don't forget to like the show, share the show, help us grow the network and grow the show. We appreciate everybody in the chat box for checking in with us this morning on a Monday after the Eagles draft. So Jeff Kerr's up next. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365. Our buddy Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports joining us now. Jeff, a good draft weekend to you, sir. I'm sure a busy weekend on your end, as it was here. Welcome to the show, man.
You guys see the bags over my eyes yet?
Yeah,
man. It's always a tough 3 days. It's a grind, Jeff Kerr. You had to deal with all the teams. I used to have to deal with all the teams years ago when I covered the league as a whole. Boy, it's a pain in the ass.
It really is, especially afterwards when you have to find the undrafted free agents. So people always say to me, like, you should worry about this and worry about that. And, to me, day 3 is the worst, honestly, because there's so many teams and there's so many players. You're just trying to track where everybody's going, and then you happen to notice a guy like, I'll just throw out there like a Jordan Travis. You're like, oh wait, he hasn't been picked yet. A couple years ago, it was Brock Purdy. I didn't realize he was not picked yet when he got picked by the 49ers. I thought he was drafted in the 5th round. That was the year all the quarterbacks went.
Yeah, and then you add in Howie Roseman trading like a madman. It makes it all the more tough when you're covering the Eagles.
Oh, you know what? I was going to send a couple texts to a couple people in the Eagles, be like, guys, seriously, like I get it. You guys are running a business here, but
all right, give me something to dislike about Howie. Now, a lot of the fans don't, because they don't like Howie personally. But man,
it's hard.
It's tough. It's tough to come up with complaints. The only one I can come up, he's probably reached a little bit for Hunt, a little bit too early. But I mean, that's nitpicking. That's only because I'm nitpicking.
And our buddy Andrew DeJean was trying to tell us for weeks that Hunt was going to be a day 2 pick. So did they reach or didn't they reach?
I think they reached.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and I was telling Zander's story about Rick Spielman when he drafted Alexander Madison. He knew he'd get Alexander Madison at the bottom. He wanted him, but he knew he'd get him at the bottom of the 3rd round. So he just kept trading down and trading down. I think he traded down 3 times, accumulated a bunch of day 3 picks. Probably did nothing with them. But
what's a better haul? Is it a player that they would have liked earlier, or is it Hunt?
No, I mean, if you like a player, you like a player, and he turned into a pretty good backup. That specific player, but when he got a chance to start last year, he kind of failed, and now he's in Las Vegas, I believe. So he's still in the league, but it was a solid backup player, clearly an NFL player. But he probably should have been drafted on day 3. But he wanted the player, and he kept trading down. He got the player, and he got extra picks. That's what Howie did with Jalix Hunt. And that's fine. We'll see how it works out.
Now, I've heard this story too.
Vic loved him too.
Yeah. Besides Vic loving him, the Eagles also loved Adida Isaac, who was taken right before Hunt was. So I'm wondering if Isaac was on the board, if they would.
Yeah, that's a possibility. There was, in some of the trades down, Zach Zinner at one point, I thought, maybe the Eagles moved down because he went. So there were some, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And you're right. Isaac goes to Baltimore right before the Eagles drafted Hunt. So maybe that was an issue. Zinner went 85 to the Browns.
They have 86? I'm trying to remember all their trades.
Yeah, and they had 86, and I'm starting to think maybe that's why they dropped down again. So that's a possibility. You never get nothing falls perfectly. But that's the thing. That's what Howie's good at is the contingencies. Even when you don't, we said, I think Zach Berman asked him, did you think there was any way in the world that you wouldn't have an offensive lineman earlier in the draft? And he said, no. He was very honest. No. And all of a sudden they get Mekhi Becton after the draft. So he's very good with contingencies. And that, I'm sure at some point they had their eyes on the player. I was thinking more Zach Zinter from Michigan than Isaac, but it could have been Isaac. I know Andy Weidel seemed to have the Eagles. He seemed to have a beat on what the Eagles were doing, which should be no surprise.
I wonder how much more of that will come in the future with Howie Roseman's tree starting to spread more and more in the NFL. We just lost Rosenberg. So I wonder if there's going to be more of that in the future where guys are kind of feeding off of what Howie does or learning from what Howie does and following his lead.
Yeah. I mean, he was upset. I know that year when they lost Brandon Brown and Ian Cunningham, he was upset that year to the point he had Joe Ferrari work on changing the rules of hiring what they call secondary football executives. He was really upset with Brandon Brown because he went to the Giants and Obviously that's a division rival, but that's just the nature of the NFL. There's not much you can do about that, to be honest. They did get the rule changed, a little different timing, so you don't get screwed as much before the draft. So he got that done.
John, by the way, this has nothing to do with Roseman, but I did think if you wanted me to be like kind of if you want to find anything negative about what he did this weekend, and again, this is nothing against Roseman or Laurie or anybody else, I thought they really pushed the whole we drafted Jeremiah Trotter thing to the point where it did feel like, okay.
Yeah, but I don't have any problem in the 5th round with that. I think.
Well, I don't either. I love the pick. Like people are saying, take him in the 3rd. I'm like, what? You insane?
Yeah, that's what the people early. It was the 2nd. My old buddy Jody Mack wanted him in the 2nd round.
He wasn't a 2nd round player. But where they got him and trading up to get him, that was brilliant on their part.
Yeah, again at 155, it's perfect. 5th round pick. And he's going to have an opportunity because he's coming here. That's the weakest spot on the team. And if he can play, he can play, and it'll be a great story. And if he can't play, he's a 5th round pick, and you write it off.
I call them all after the 2nd round lottery tickets, and that is That is a huge lottery ticket, just because I seen the kid play at St. Joe's Prep. He can ball, and he was a higher ranked recruit than Marvin Harrison was. Like this kid can play, but everybody wants to factor in the size, and size be damned. The kid's got football instincts. He's got the bloodline. He's been trained for this since pretty much he was 4 years old. He's going to be a good football player if he gets that opportunity. That's just my opinion.
Jeff, you just brought up Jeremiah Trotter. I want to get into your opinions on some of the players the Eagles got. They get Quinyon Mitchell. They get Cooper DeJean. We talked a little bit about Jalix Hunt. What do you think of the Eagles haul? What stands out to you and the players they were able to pick up in the draft this year?
Well, the first 2 picks I really liked, and I think it was more of the value. So I don't think that franchise ever thought in a million years they would get Quinyon Mitchell at 22. I think they would, if going in the Thursday morning, if they wanted him, they probably would. At least they thought they would have had to trade up to 12. Well, they didn't have to trade up at all, so that's a win.
I had them trading up to 12.
Did you?
See, and picking Mitchell, which I got the player right. I got the spot wrong. So a couple report, hey, take credit for it. So I'll take credit for it. I knew they wanted the player, but I didn't think any way he would be there at 22. No way.
I was on a couple podcasts on Thursday, and I would mention Quinyon Mitchell at the end of but I don't think they could trade up and get him. So I sold on Fontenot or Arnold. And
yeah, by the way, that's if you didn't know, if you guys just closed your eyes and didn't know who picked who, and I told you Troy Fontenot, 20th overall, Zach Frazier, 51st overall, Roman Wilson, 84th overall, Peyton Wilson, best linebacker in the draft, but injury concerns, bottom of the 3rd round, 98 overall, Mason McCormick, 119 overall. You would say that's the Philadelphia Eagles. That was the Steelers draft. That was Andy Waddle.
They had a good draft too.
Yeah.
I was more than pleased with the guys the Steelers were getting. I think they got better, but Zander, you were saying about the first couple picks. I mean, John, by the way, as a Big Ten fan, I've always was told it was Cooper DeJean. Is it Cooper DeJean?
Cooper DeJean, yes.
Yeah, it's
now they want it to be DeJean.
Yeah, in Philly, it's going to be DeJean. Whether
it's going to be DeJean, yeah.
But it is Cooper DeJean. It is.
I actually had a couple players in the Big Ten right now say, "Is it DeJean or DeJean?" I'm like,
well, I went back and forth in the whole process. I didn't know until, it is DeJean though. And that was a tremendous pick.
I love that pick.
The Eagles had a 1st round grade on him. That's a player they would have considered later in the 1st round. I think they would have tried to trade down if one of that group of Mitchell or Fautanu. That group, obviously, they love J.C. Latham, but J.C. Latham just went like a rocket late in the process. A lot of people thought
seventh.
Yeah, a lot of people thought he was going to get drafted fifth by the Chargers, and they went the safer route with Joe Alt, and then Tennessee, which wanted Joe Alt, draft J.C. Latham. So they knew. And by the way, somebody at the Eagles said that, that you might want to downplay Latham because he's not going to be there. So they knew damn well he wasn't going to be there. It was evidently an open secret in the league, but they loved the player. Faltano is the guy I think they would have drafted if he was there at 22, but that would have been surprised. That would have been a surprise pre-draft that he fell to 20. And it was a big surprise that Mitchell fell. So I this idea though, here's something that drives me crazy, Jeff, because the Eagles, it worked out and the Eagles get Mitchell and DeJean. And now it's, they were targeting quarterback. They bought carpet bomb cornerback.
No,
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Drives me nuts.
Yeah, they weren't targeting quarterback. Like the only two cornerbacks I heard that they could target around one were Mitchell and Arnold, and they didn't think they could get Mitchell. But they thought they could trade up and get Arnold, and they didn't have to do that for neither of them. It just happened to fall into their laps. I mean, we knew quarterbacks were going early in this draft. Did we really think we were going to pick
6?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
really
you could almost guarantee that 3 general managers are going to be out of a job in 2 years, because there were 3 quarterbacks who deserved to be first round picks, and everybody else probably should have been in the second round.
Yeah, or later.
And they're getting picked 8, 10, and 12. I mean, that's got disaster written all over it.
I'm not a fan. So I always say to myself, tell me where they're drafted, and I'll give you my best analysis.
Well, and that's why I say McCarthy's got a chance because of where he was drafted. So he's got it. I mean, Brock Purdy turned into as a 7th round. So if you go to the right spot, you have a chance. And even if you want to bend over backwards and say Sean Payton still got it, maybe Bo Nix has got a chance. Atlanta, I that's the dumbest pick in the history of the world.
Does Bo Nix have a chance though with that bad roster?
Probably not, but at least the head coach understands how to develop a quarterback. Like, one of the most egregious things to me with Chicago and Justin Fields is look who they surrounded him with. Now, I don't know if he could have played, but you have a defensive head coach. You have an offensive coordinator who basically was, Aaron Rodgers' errand boy, as we've seen with Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, Rodgers runs the offense. Who cares what Luke Getsy does except get him coffee?
Now you got a real coordinator in there in Waldron, which they
don't even. They have such a terrible history with quarterbacks. I'm even concerned about Caleb Williams,
even with the talent around them.
Well, they still have a defensive head coach.
Yeah,
I'm not in love with he's probably better than Luke Getsy, but we're not talking about Kyle Shanahan. And that's, let's be honest. I know Philadelphia fans hate him, but that's the reason Brock Purdy's Brock Purdy. And that's why people are so high on the Minnesota situation, because they love Kevin O'Connell. They have Jefferson. We'll see for how long. Addison, Hawkinson. Now they have Aaron Jones. They got good tackles. That's a good situation for a quarterback. If Caleb Williams went there, I'd say superstar. He's in Chicago. I'll wait and see.
So this is what I was told by a bunch of people about Shane Waldron. By the way, I really like him.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell.
No, he's not Kevin O'Connell, but he did extend Russell Wilson's career about 2 more years than it should, or made him really good for 2 more years. I'll just say that.
He's got to be better than Luke Getsy. I'll give him that.
Everybody's better than that. Well, if John, we had to do the tree here. Luke Getsy is better than Nathaniel Hackett, but they both stink.
Yeah. I don't know if he is better than Nathaniel Hackett.
You know what? You know what team I was shocked? I can't remember now. I know they didn't draft one in the first 3 rounds. The Raiders. I was shocked they did not even attempt to draft the quarterback, but I give them credit.
Poor Raiders got left out of the party. They were 13, 6 quarterbacks. At least give them credit. They didn't take Spencer Rattler at 13.
They Antonio Pierce even said on Thursday night, they said, look, Brock Bowers is our best guy on the board. We just said we're taking him. It doesn't matter. We weren't trading up. It was, we'll see where the chips fall. And I think that was the right move for them.
I don't know. I don't like that. They just drafted Michael Mayer the year before. Who, Bowers is better. Don't get me wrong, but he's very good. Michael Mayer. I'm like, what are you going to play 12 with Aiden O'Connell?
Well, with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, you might need 12.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not too high on the Raiders. That's why, when people say we give too much credit for Howie and this and that and this and that, believe me, I want to criticize the guy, but look at these other morons.
And they're a big part of the reason why Howie was able to do so well, because the board just fell their way because of all these decisions.
I mean, look at Dallas. They don't draft a running back. They decide, let's bring back the running back we cut,
right? Who
is actually a worse player now than a year ago when you cut him. Oh, and by the way, he's going to be your starter because Jerry Jones just can't help himself.
But I'll say this about Dallas. They're like, it's a terrible organization because they're sort of fractured. And Steven and Jerry do free agency and all the stuff like that. And but they draft well. Will McClay is unbelievable. If you look at the history of their drafts since he took over, he's the best personnel guy in the business.
They got a nice player in the first round too, by the way, and they traded down to get him.
And they have a history of drafting, and they got Cooper Beebe, who is a player I thought the Eagles were interested in. And they've been very good drafting offensive linemen. They got a lot of criticism about Tyler Smith a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden
he's a good player.
He's a really good player. So you had Tyler Guyton, who obviously was connected to the Eagles a lot because of his relationship with Lane Johnson. But Marshawn Nealand, the edge rusher from Western Michigan, is another player I looked at for the Eagles, maybe in the second round. They ended up getting him at 56. They got that linebacker from Notre Dame, who's really athletic. Kalen Carson, a slot cornerback, the Eagles that brought him in, had a lot of interest in him as well. They're a really good drafting team, Dallas. I would say
how Mozzie Smith turns out. It certainly looked like they reached.
Yeah, well, again, not everybody.
And hit on them all, but that's certainly one to note.
I'm talking about the consistency. If you go over probably a 10-year period, I would say Baltimore's number 1, and then Dallas is number 2, just from strictly drafting. Now, when Jerry gets involved with free agency, they've had a top 5 roster forever. That's the thing with the Cowboys. They can't win a damn playoff game with all this talent.
They are the Sixers of the NFL, John.
Yeah. Most of their talent, don't even get me started on the Sixers. Most of their talent.
I think that's generous to the Sixers, by the way.
Yeah. It's very generous, but
the Sixers are not the brand the Cowboys are. So at least the Cowboys have that.
Most of their talent is homegrown, the Cowboys, the relevant talent. And they come up, look at the corners, look at Diggs, look at Bland.
Micah.
Well, Mike is, yeah.
I'm just going through defensive guys at this rate.
Yeah.
Like DeMarcus Lawrence was a homegrown guy. DeMarcus Ware was a homegrown guy back in the day.
Yeah, they are a tremendous. Eagles fans will hate to hear that, but they are a tremendous drafting team. Baltimore 1, Dallas 2 over the past since
Baltimore's another team. I swear the league just lets them pick whoever
they really do. They really do. It seems
I like that corner the Ravens got. I forget.
Wiggins.
Tampa. Yeah, I think I like the prospect of that kid. Obviously, a little bit unpolished, but I do think he's a perfect fit for the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like him here. I would have ran from Nate. People wanted Nate. He's just too small. I don't think in Bick's defense, he run support. I don't think he'd be good. But there, and Kyle Hamilton. It's like you see what Kyle Hamilton's turned into. Baltimore was going to draft Jordan Davis. That's why the Eagles moved up ahead of him to get Jordan Davis. And then all of a sudden they get Kyle Hamilton, and he turns into maybe the best safety in football. And people look at that from a Philadelphia perspective. He would not be Kyle Hamilton if he was here playing in this defense. They use him at the line of scrimmage, as that piece, as that aggressive type of guy. And, here he'd be playing quarters. He wouldn't be Kyle Hamilton.
On that same note, then, how does that bode for the two defensive backs the Eagles just drafted? Can you say that same thing, or are they fits for what the Eagles are doing on defense?
Yeah, they're better fits for what the Eagles are doing on defense. But yeah, if you think Cooper DeJean is turning into Kyle Hamilton, he isn't. He isn't, because that's not how they play.
By the way, John, I was asked this by a couple fans on Twitter this weekend, and I didn't get to answering them because I got a lot of questions about. The Eagles drafted a lot of returners, and a lot of people asked, what does that mean for Britain? And I said, I don't think it means anything, but you don't know.
I think Britain's a little too honest for the Eagles.
Yeah, way too honest.
I want to.
I hope I'm wrong, by the way. I hope I'm wrong, but he's a really good punt returner. I mean, really good. And I do not think. I do not think they're going to find another punt returner like Britton Covey. But if Aeneas can do it, yeah, Britain's in trouble.
I will say this weekend during the draft, I saw a lot of different analysis attributed to the kickoff returns and the special teams unit. How much of a change or how much of a factor was that in this draft because of the changes the NFL made to the kickoffs? Jeff Kerr, I'll go to you for that because I did see you tweeting about it a couple times.
Yeah, so I actually thought it was one of the reasons they drafted Jalen Hunt because he can do that. And that was one of the first guys I thought of him like, well, okay, he'll probably be on the kickoff team. He'll probably do something like that. I don't think Will Shipley's much of a gunner or anything like that, but I think they could stack Trotter on there if they need to. That was a guy I was considering, but I noticed a lot around the league. A lot of teams were making that a priority. Did you notice a lot of return guys are getting drafted, John? Did you notice that?
Yeah, they definitely paid more attention to having that type of player, which obviously they didn't care about in recent seasons. Now everybody wanted a punt returner, but nobody cared about kick returners. And now they're caring again. So that part of it. And the Eagles, that was probably the biggest positive of last season was how they turned the special teams around. Jalen Hunt, he might be able to do it, but he ain't going to do it because he's not going to be active, would be my guess, on game days. He's going to redshirt this season, barring injuries. Obviously, injuries always play a factor into these types of things.
Which again, I call these guys lottery tickets. I know this guy is the ultimate lottery ticket, but sometimes I just feel like this franchise tries to outsmart people.
Yeah, and that's, but again, that's, and even that, I admit I'm nitpicking a little bit. But if you think about the way Ringo and Josh Jobe developed as special teams players, then Zach McPherson's going to have trouble making this team, but he's a great special teams player. They got a bunch of good special teams players.
They're
now.
Deep at corner, by the way. All of a sudden, they're deep.
Yeah, they're
a lot of players in that cornerback room. Yeah,
everybody was wringing their hands about Isaiah Rodgers. Why isn't he back? Why isn't the NFL? What happened? And now nobody cares.
Did you hear he's starting, John? That's all That's all Twitter tells me. He's starting.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares now. Yeah, that's how quickly things change.
So it was actually funny when I listened to Eagles. This is before they drafted DeJean. Because did you just omit DeJean? I'm like, no, I tweeted this Thursday night. I said, oh, by the way, I might just put DeJean at safeties because they're running out of bodies. They have too many bodies at corner.
Yeah, they might play him at safety. They might play him in the slot as well. That would be interesting. We'll see if he can handle that. That'll be the most interesting part of rookie camp. And hopefully we'll get to talk to Vic Fangio at that stage. What his plan might be for Cooper DeJean. Generally, the Eagles don't like to start a player with a bunch of different positions on their plate. We'll see if he's different with him, or if he's going to say, hey, we're going to start him out at safety or outside corner or slot corner. If they try him at outside corner, he's not going to play.
No, but at safety, he could start week 1. I mean, it's a potential there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's got more of a potential to play at safety or slot corner.
I actually, so when I was watching stuff on DeJean, and again, this is going back to my Big Ten knowledge too with him, I kept saying to myself, this guy could really be a good safety. And I mean, I'm talking like Pro Bowl, all pro safety. And I'm like, I wonder if any team that drafts him makes him one. Well, the team that drafted him might just do that.
Yeah, a lot of teams were looking at him as a safety primarily. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting how the Eagles move forward with him. And obviously, Vic will have a plan. And I have a plan. I have a hunch it's not going to be outside corner because barring injuries, he's not going to be able to play there. And I think they want to get him on the field.
By the way, I got mad Friday night when they posted Cooper DeJean's basketball highlights.
Duncan,
well, here's the thing. As a basketball coach, what upsets me, the guy can do a hell of a lot more than dunk. I'll tell you that. I've seen.
Yeah, but anytime you see a 6'1" person with that kind of explosion
he's got hops, man.
He is a natural athlete. I love it. From that perspective, I love it because I think I mean, we've talked about it.
Maybe he could play Game 5 for the Sixers before you get started with the Eagles.
So here's a funny story. I was talking to one of my buddies who's an AAU coach nationally who coached against his AAU team a couple times, and he sent me a couple videos of him. He's like, dude, like, this guy could have played college basketball. I'm like, yeah, he easily could have. Right? Maybe not Division I, but he was an all-state player in Iowa. Like he could play.
Yeah, you need some of those at Boyertown, right?
We're losing guys more than gaining at this point.
Jeff, I want to ask your opinion on a couple of the day 3 picks. I know day 3 is a depth type of day, but maybe I'm wrong, but it certainly looks like they got some players that have good upside potential, maybe could potentially be a starter, which would be a huge win, even if it's not this year, but one day in the league. What did you make, or did any of those picks on day 3 stand out to you that the Eagles made?
Well, I like Will Shipley probably more than most people. And again, I think Eagles are banking on what he was, or prior
Red
to the
Star,
injury.
baby.
He was a Red Star. Yep. They'll never admit that he was a Red Star.
Oh, they will admit it, and they don't have to admit it. He's so obviously a Red Star.
By the way, they couldn't answer Zach's question when he asked who the
No, they don't want to. They won't answer the question, but they'll do it behind the scenes. They don't want to disparage anybody else.
But Will Shipley, man, I'll tell you, you watch this guy the first 2 years at Clemson, you would have thought he was going to be at the very minimum a day 2 pick. And the fact that he got hurt last year just tanked his whole draft stock. I love the fact he was able to catch passes out of the backfield. He doesn't have that breakaway speed. And I think that's what scared people off. Like, he doesn't have a lot of 50-yard runs or a lot of highlight runs, but you need a guy to just kind of move the chains, and the guy who just
I'm torn on Will Shipley because Zander will tell you I am so impressed by that.
Yeah, you almost won me over, Johnny Mac, with how impressed you were from his.
I just hate the way the Eagles approach the running back position.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm done with the gadget guys, and he seems to be kind of one of them.
I don't know.
He is one.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a gadget guy, but they're obsessed with getting running backs who can catch the football. And
But
I
he
get
can't
it.
catch the football as well as the tape or the highlight tape.
No, he's got a lot of drops, but he's
And a
got
lot of fumbles too.
He's got potential at least, but they're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with it, and it never works. And they keep looking, and they keep looking. And Christian McCaffrey's their white whale. Now they signed an undrafted kid from Georgia, Kendall Milton.
I like him.
He's a one-cut running back. I've been looking for that.
John, we talked about that yesterday. We've been looking for it.
And it'll probably amount to nothing because they'll get him in camp and say, "Oh, he can't catch the football." I would just love to see somebody who hits the stinking hole behind an offensive line that creates a bunch of holes.
By the way, guys,
listen, here's my problem.
Don't bank on Saquon doing that, by the way. Don't bank on Saquon.
If we have Brock Purdy in Philadelphia, sure, I love the running backs that can catch out of the backfield. We have Jalen Hurts. We just paid him a humongous contract. He doesn't throw the ball to running backs out of the backfield.
Well, that's part of it.
It's not his game. I don't know why they're so adamant to continue to go that route when Jalen has just shown that's not his preferred target ever, basically in any circumstance.
No, and we're going to see with Saquon. I think people are going to be disappointed because they're expecting so much. And
well, at least Saquon can do the other stuff, though.
Yeah, he can. But
he won't hit the hole for you, though.
You don't hit the freaking hole. Yeah, he's trying to Miles Sanders it because that's what they teach him at Penn State, evidently. Go for a home run.
Hey, when you see
I'm taking a shot at Jeff.
But you see the track record here, can you blame him?
No,
now, of course, they're teaching their running backs to do that now, and they're not as productive, which drives me insane.
Yeah. When you have the best offensive line in football, as the Eagles did for a number of years, and maybe they won't be the best this year without Jason Kelce, but they'll still be very good. I don't know. I would just love to see a chain mover, but everybody wants everything. When you have A.J. Brown and Devontae and Dallas Goedert, you don't need everything. Just get the chain mover. 4-minute offense. Close games.
You mean to tell me you didn't want Ricky Pearsall or any of those guys, John?
No, I could care less. About Ricky Pearsall. What's he going to do? There's not enough traffic to go around. There's only one football.
I'm trying to figure out why the 49ers drafted him at 31. I love the fit. Just don't get why
they were trying to trade Debo and or Brandon Ayuk. And they still probably will try to trade one of them. So they're trying to, project life after those.
That was an interesting part of the draft when the Bills and the Chiefs moved, and then the Chiefs take that speedy wide receiver.
I love
Keon Coleman. The Bills start with Keon Coleman. Maybe the Bills wanted Keon Coleman the whole time.
They did, and I love Keon Coleman.
Yeah. Did you guys see his prep? Boy, was he funny!
Oh, it was awesome.
Oh man,
I said, rolling. I actually said when the Bills drafted him, I texted a couple of people like, "Yeah, Bills fans are gonna love this guy." They're like, "He's a football player." I'm like, "Well, a little more than that."
And listen, it's just personality, but I think players like that with that type of personality, they work in the league. They especially at wide receiver. So I thought he was pretty funny, and I think he's going to be a pretty good player.
I apologize to the Bills. I criticized them a lot on Thursday night for basically giving the Chiefs the player they wanted, but they got the player they wanted too, and they got draft picks for it. So I can't knock them.
Did you see Coleman run the gauntlet drill at the combine? Everybody was upset because he didn't run well. And I forget, it wasn't Worthy who set the record, but it was one of the fast guys who's can't even run a straight line, doesn't know the ball's coming at him. He doesn't know what to do. And Coleman's like a machine.
Okay.
Just
watch his eyes. He knows exactly what's coming.
He is a football player. He is going to be a great wide receiver. And I'll never say, look, if a receiver goes to Kansas City and Andy, he's probably going to be pretty good. But, I don't care. Go get the 4-2-1 guy. I'd rather have Keon Coleman. I really would.
Yeah, well, when you have Patrick Mahomes, I mean, there's some factor in that, right? Get the guy that can blow the top.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They're trying to go back to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, and they don't have that. They have Rasheed for now. I mean, he's gonna get suspended, but they're still gonna have him. So they didn't need I guess a guy like Keon, but the Bills did.
Yeah, they certainly did. So who impressed you most? Give me the top team, and it's not allowed to be the Philadelphia Eagles.
It wasn't the Eagles. Honestly, probably the Steelers. We mentioned them earlier. The guys they were able to get. They got.
I love the Steelers.
Yeah. What you call it? They got John, help me out here. The guard from Wilson. I mean,
Zach Frazier.
Zach Frazier.
They got Zach Center. They got Mason McCormick. I swear to God, he knew every offense. It started with Baltano. He knew every offensive lineman how he wanted, and he snuck them. And he just and Roman Wilson. I thought that
they got him too.
Yeah. And then Peyton Wilson, I talked about that night of the draft. Like, that's who I would have picked if I were the Eagles. And I said this.
I love Peyton Wilson. Loved him.
That is the best linebacker in the draft, but he's got a bunch of injury concerns. Now, I mentioned this. Now, the Steelers, for those who don't know, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, big time positions. James Bradley's out there, one of the go-to guys. Joe Maroon's out there. If they're clearing Peyton Wilson, that to me means something. That team clearing him. And if the Eagles had the red flag on him, I'm going to disagree with it. To be able to get the best linebacker in the draft at 98, that could be a day one starter for the Eagles. So that was part of my problem with the Hunt pick. I mean, day one starter. And they might have a good player 2 years down the line.
And we've talked about the comparisons from the Steelers to the Eagles. That's a very Eagles-esque move to take a great player that has a little bit of injury concerns. They must have had the red flag.
And he was there. But by the way, I was asked this on a podcast last night, John, and I think it's a fair question. I know how they answer it. Does it bother you, like guys like Jalix Hunt, from a school like Houston Christian, which I know people joke doesn't exist, but it does, and they play in the Southland Conference.
Houston Baptist. They just renamed it. Houston Baptist.
Exactly. But does it bother you that he hasn't played against that level of competition?
No, that doesn't bother me. That I mean, there's tons of great players from small schools and that kind of thing. It happens all the time. You don't scout the helmet. Generally you look for somebody. If you are playing at that level, you want guys who dominate on film against lesser competition. And by all accounts, he did. So I don't have any problem. I don't have any problem with the small school stuff, but they have a need. Yeah, people said this about Reddick with the trade. You think you're a contender? You have an obvious need. The best linebackers right there for the taking. Late in the draft because of some issues. He had some off the field issues too, but earlier in his career. So he's got some issues. I'm not saying he doesn't. But man, I mean, this is a 6'4" guy, long, runs like a 4.4. If he was clean from a medical standpoint, he would have been a first round pick. He would have been a first round pick, even in this era.
He was the best linebacker, I thought. And again, I'm not as knowledgeable in linebackers as I am a lot of positions, but I thought he was the best one.
He was. He won the Bednarik Award. He won the Butkus Award. I mean, and he played at a Power 5 school. What
linebacker I thought the Eagles were going to get? I know they like Jordan McGee a lot.
And Temple kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they liked him.
Round. I have no problem with Trotter in the 5th round. I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, it's lottery tickets at that point.
But I'm not comparing Jeremiah Trotter to Peyton Wilson. I'm sorry.
I'm not comparing Jeremiah Trotter to Jeremiah Trotter.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, he went to a small school, Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah.
Felix Hunt, though, has already won over some fans in the city by calling Howie Roseman Big Pimpin'. That was pretty.
Oh yeah, he called
Yeah,
that. That was hilarious.
That was.
By the way,
that was funny.
is that the first Jalix you've ever met?
That is the
Like,
first Felix
Oh,
I've ever seen. I've never seen that name anywhere.
Well, he's named after a cologne.
Yeah, I saw that. I
Mom's
saw that.
favorite perfume. I think it was.
Like he wouldn't be on the all name team for the draft, but I feel like he deserves like an honorable mention for that. I'm like, what an awesome name, Jalix. I'm like, I'm kind of down on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
when Peyton Wilson's on the field for the Steelers, who, by the way, have a history of knowing how to play linebackers, where do you hear that narrative start?
Oh boy, I heard they had some guy named Jack Lambert at one point.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like the pick. Sorry, Eagles fans. I don't like the pick. Could have fixed your biggest problem right there.
Well, that's assuming a perfect world where Peyton would have been healthy, right?
Yeah, might get hurt in training camp. But again, it's not the first round. It's 94 overall.
I always think it's ironic. The year the Eagles actually cared about linebackers, and I mean cared because they had a Chip Kelly holdover and an Andy Reid holdover. They won the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jordan Hicks was a good player, and he was a third-round pick. He was a Chip Kelly guy.
Yeah.
Chip deserves credit for Jordan Hicks. He was a very good player, but he always got hurt here, and then he left, and he stayed healthy for like 5 straight years.
He's still around, too.
Yeah, he's in Cleveland. He did finally get hurt again last year, but he's in Cleveland, so he's still going. Very good player. They signed Nigel Bradham, but they didn't go overboard. And Nigel did a good job. And they still had Michael Kendricks at the time. And Michael Kendricks is probably the most athletic linebacker they've had. And Devin White is probably more athletic than him, but there's no evidence that he can harness that in a fruitful way, shall we say. Except 3 games in the playoffs when they won the Super Bowl. So if you can tap into that, maybe you're fine.
Or as my source in Tampa tells me, which Devin White you get in 2020 playoffs, Devin White, or the rest of his career, Devin White.
Yeah, well, odds are you're getting the rest of his career, Devin White. I don't know. That's the one pick I'd look at and say, guys, right there for the taking. Goes 4 picks later. And, is Quinyon Mitchell going to be a day 1 starter? Yes. Is, again, barring injury. Cooper DeJean going to be a day 1 starter? I don't know. Jalix Hunt? Will not. Peyton Wilson, day 1 starter. Day 1 starter.
Again, another franchise that just seems to get whoever they want.
Jeff, we kept you a long time. I appreciate the contribution to the show, as always. I just want to ask one more question on the way out. We can keep it quick. You had to pick one player. Who's your favorite player the Eagles went with this weekend? Favorite draft pickup, person that you think has a chance to have a big impact, not just in year 1, but in your NFL career?
I find this so ironic too, Zander. This is a good question, by the way, because I am going to say it's Cooper DeJean, but I would have hated it at 22. I'm like, not that you reach for him, but it's like, okay, if the board went that way and the good corners were taking the guys they want, sure. But the fact that you were able to get him at 40, I don't know why he fell like he did. I thought he'd go back into the first round, like the Baltimore, around those teams, San Francisco.
Yeah.
But when he was still on the board, and I remember it was the late 30s, I said, you know what? It wouldn't shock me if they did trade up. And they did. And they traded up, and they started to run the cornerbacks. There were 4 straight cornerbacks taken.
Yeah. They know, and that's another how we knew Green Bay was taking them, and
Green Bay needed,
and they moved and they got him. Yeah, and a week ago today, on Monday before the draft, if you came into the week and told Eagles fans, or the Eagles brass, I think even, or even Eagles reporters or beat reporters, you're going to walk out of day 1 and 2 with both Quinyon and Cooper DeJean, I think a lot of people would have said you're crazy or thought that was very unlikely. So from that perspective, I think the Eagles they won.
Now, to be fair, Green Bay wanted Cooper DeJean.
And they drafted a lot of safeties.
DeJean. And they dropped back when they weren't able to get him. And you know who they picked at 45?
Edgerrin Cooper.
Edgerrin Cooper. So another.
By the way, I would have liked here too.
Another day one starter for the Eagles if he was here. Now I think Wilson's better, but he's cleaner because he.
Is that a value thing though, John? Eagles just don't value the linebacker.
Yeah. Well, clearly it's a value thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Clearly it's a value thing, but. You know, Howie's also been a little bit, conflicted when he talks about Saquon Barkley because it's, all of a sudden it's not a value thing. So it can change, evidently. And they don't think I'm not trying to compare Edgerrin Cooper or Peyton Wilson to Saquon Barkley, but I am trying to compare them to what the Eagles have. That's the issue. All right.
It makes sense. Like you talked about it with Trotter. Trotter is a 5th round pick, but he still has a chance to get on the field because of who the Eagles have. Right.
Yes. That's my issue. The Eagles are so weak at all ball linebacker.
That was my my overreactions piece. I did overreactions pieces after the draft every night, and day 3, I'm looking for something. I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. Jeremiah Tryer's going to start week 1 for the Eagles. And, of course, Eagles fans
shock me at all. Wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, and Eagles fans jumped out, no one's saying he's a week 1 starter. Well, guess what I'm saying it is. And if you look at their linebackers,
there is a path to playing time. Now, he's got to play great in the summer. Devin White's got to play really poorly in the summer. But if you think that's not possible, that is possible.
It's very possible.
Yes.
Jeff Kerr, thank you very much, man. If you guys like Jeff Kerr, make sure you like the show because his interview today was awesome. He gave us great insight on not only the Eagles, but the whole NFL draft. Jeff, thanks for checking in, man. We appreciate it.
It sounds great. At some point, guys, I am going to get sleep.
Yeah. It's coming soon, guys. I promise.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you, Jeff.
Appreciate it, bud.
Hey, guys. Thank you.
All right, Johnny Mac, let's get to a quick break. When we come back, we'll quickly touch on the undrafted free agents. We didn't get a chance to talk about them in the full draft recap we did yesterday, and we only have a couple minutes before Devin Jackson of the Philadelphia Inquirer joins. He had some great breakdowns on a lot of good on a lot of the Eagles draft picks, so we'll get into that with him. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. We'll be right back after the break.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
the greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. The Birds 365, a football Monday after the NFL draft, a good draft for the Philadelphia Eagles. John and I did a good recap yesterday on the full draft and had great draft coverage all weekend long. If you missed any of that, be sure to go and check it out and tune in. John, we didn't get a chance to talk about the undrafted guys. We've talked about that it was a smaller class because of the way how many prospects there were, and Eagles put an emphasis on futures contracts because of it. Did any undrafted guys stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a smaller class, but as typical with the Eagles, and Howie called it the smallest class. He mentioned 7. I only know of 6 to this point. Now, things change. Undrafted guys usually don't sign their contracts to rookie camp, which will be coming up this weekend. And you know, they may have shifted when they signed Mekhi Becton. They might have dropped somebody, and that could be the 7th. But right now, you have a couple offensive linemen with names that are difficult to pronounce. Gottlieb Aize from Maryland. Now,
the names are super tough.
Yeah. Now, Stoutland was at his pro day. It's not overwhelming because Maryland's so close, but evidently there was pretty significant interest there, and he was a potential late round pick. They drafted a really, really big offensive tackle. They got huge offensive tackles with Mailata and Becton, and now Aneem Dankwa, who played left tackle at Howard. Just massive guy. But I would say the best undrafted kid they got was Gabe Hall, who's a defensive tackle from Baylor. And most people thought that he was going to be drafted. He was definitely a draftable commodity. He's kind of he's 6'6", but he's a defensive tackle. So he's a 3 technique type. Got a little bit of a pass rush, and I'm surprised he didn't get drafted. I mentioned earlier in the show Kendall Milton from Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him. Kind of a ground and pound type of running back.
Yeah, he's a strict one-cut guy, and I'd love to see it, but he's probably not going to get an opportunity here. Andre Sam, who's finished his career, he's weird from an Eagles perspective because he's one of those older. I think he's going to be 26 this year. The Eagles generally don't do that. Played 7 years in college, 3 different colleges, finished at LSU. He's got some cornerback safety versatility, but I mean, I don't think you're going to see any splashes, but if you do, it's probably going to be from Gabe Hall. And the Eagles are pretty deep at defensive tackle, but get a young guy with some upside. I guarantee he'll be around for the practice squad if he gets through waivers at the end of camp. But he's also got, I always say NFL GMs tend to keep at least one undrafted free agent at the bare minimum because they like to say, hey, look at me. I found this guy. And if the Eagles stay to that, it's probably going to be Gabe Hall, I would think.
So he's the best chance. How about, what do you know about McAllen Castles, tight end out of Tennessee? He's 6'4", 244. So
yeah, I should have mentioned him as well. A lot of people had him as a draftable grade. Typical Eagles tight end in the fact that he's 6'5", I think, but he's not even 240 pounds. So he's not a blocker. He's a Grant Calcaterra type. And is he going to beat out Grant Calcaterra? It's probably an uphill battle. So Definitely a practice squad guy, though. Another one some thought would go in the 6th or 7th round, but strictly a flex tight end. You're not going to get much blocking out of a 235-pound guy. So, the Eagles need a backup tight end. It might be C.J. Uzomah as a veteran, but that's obviously short term. And they prefer Grant Calcaterra to start showing a little bit more, and everybody forgets about Albert O is here. So difficult numbers game. Noah Tungia is still here. So a lot of bodies at tight end.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. And one more question. We have Devin Jackson in the green room. We'll get him up in a minute, who did really, really great draft work this week, covering all the Eagles picks and prior. We had him on prior, and he did a great breakdown as well. But John Ross came in for a workout. 4'2", I mean, fast guy. Is any chance he has makes the roster, or is it?
I would be stunned if he's coming out for a tryout at rookie camp. Boy, John Ross, 2017, I think, was when he got drafted. I have to look that up. But
yeah, former first-round pick. I'm not sure if it was 2017.
Yeah, he was another one. Howie's been that way. The Eagles liked him in that pre-draft process. I remember he ended up going way too high. He's a top 10 pick.
He was the 9th overall in the 2017 draft. Yeah.
And he set the combine record, which ironically just got broken this year for 40 by Xavier Worthy. Really fast guy. I wouldn't expect much out of John Ross. It's interesting. He's coming to the Eagles for a tryout. I just saw Jarvis Landry's going to the Jaguars for a tryout. The Eagles did lose Quez Watkins, and everyone says Quez could run. And as you heard Nick Sirianni say up teen times, that's meaningful to be able to open the field for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. But, I don't think he's going to be that. I would be shocked if the Eagles even brought him in.
Enter Ainias Smith, draft pick by the Eagles this year, who could fill.
Yeah, Ainias is like a 4 or 5 guy, though. He doesn't have that kind of speed, but good slot receiver, good manufacturer, touch player, potential returner. He can help you in a lot of different ways. Whereas John Ross can help you by running past people and spacing the field. And I'm not sure that's enough to get him a roster spot on the 90-man, never mind 53-man.
Yeah. All right, Devin Jackson coming up next from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and keeping it locked in on Birds 365. Great draft breakdowns by Devin Jackson all weekend long, and we'll get him up next right after the break to give it to you guys here on Birds 365. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, Eagles fans, a Monday morning after the NFL draft, joined now by Devin Jackson of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Devin, I want to give a shout out to you real quick. A great draft coverage all weekend long. I read all of your work, and you covered some of these players phenomenally. I want to get right to you and get a question in. What'd you make of the Eagles draft? They got some good players. It seems like they really got some guys that could be starters even in day 3. What'd you make of the draft, and what was your overall opinion of the players the Eagles added in the draft this year?
Yeah, I thought they got really good value, especially in the first 2 picks. When you think about where, the players like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were projected to go, it was very surprising, but also not at the same time to see them kind of go after Cooper DeJean after getting Quinyon Mitchell. I would say not surprising the fact that, they showed a lot of interest in him in the pre-draft process, and he made a lot of sense in what they're trying to do defensively, especially in the secondary, getting younger, getting a little bit more versatile in terms of where you can play in multiple positions, plus upgrading a position that really wasn't a strong suit for the Eagles defense last year. So to see them get both of those guys, I thought was very intriguing, and in terms of them, going so long without getting a first round defensive back. And then, double dipping in the draft that they do kind of break that long 22-year drought. So, especially in those first 2 picks, I thought they got tremendous value. Now, you get to kind of the later picks of the draft, they were always going to go after an edge rusher. And obviously went after Jalix Hunt from Houston Christian, who is kind of going to be more of a developmental player, but I think you're going to see the best football from him in 2 to 3 years versus seeing him as an immediate contributor. Plus, you added in the fact that they added a first-round edge rusher last year, Nolan Smith, that they're expecting big things from this year. So, I think that pick probably, some people are kind of a little bit split on, but when you watch his film and see some of the explosiveness and some of the traits that he possesses, you get excited for what's to come in a few years from him versus what you could get immediately. Then you look at the day 3 picks. I thought they, made some nice picks there. Anaya Smith, I thought was a really good get in terms of getting a slot receiver that he's not going to be your, take the top off the defense type of player, but he's a reliable possession receiver that can make some explosive plays in the short passing game. And they need more guys that can create those types of plays, especially in the short areas, and being able to be called upon on third downs. Because outside, obviously, of Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, that third person was always consistent between Dallas Goedert or whoever was in as a third receiver. So I thought that made a lot of sense. Then you look at some of the offensive lineman additions. When you look at Trevor Keegan, he's a guy that, has a lot of starting experience, really good player, kind of in I would say in a phone booth type of player where he's a really good blocker, like head on. He does a really nice job cutting off angles on linebackers and getting to the second level. Really stout in pass protection, can pass off stunts really well. So I think with him, you're getting a guy that can bring some more depth to, especially in the interior of the offensive line, and the potential to play both guard spots. He played left guard in college, but I think he has the ability to play right guard as well. But I think that move also signaled that they feel like Tyler Steen may be able to take a step to being a starting right guard for the Eagles. Then the last few picks, you look at Johnny Wilson, Dylan McMahon, and then Will Shipley. I think those guys are all going to be a little bit more depth pieces, especially with Anaya Smith and Will Shipley. They're going to bring an added extra addition in the special teams game as well. As both of them have experience as returners, especially Anais, who is a really dynamic returner, in fact. But when you look at McMahon and Johnny Wilson, I think those two guys are a little bit of what can we get out of them when we bring them in. Johnny Wilson is such a big receiver, but a guy that it's going to be interesting to see how he's used. Some people think he should move to tight end. Some people think he should stick out receiver. It seems like the Eagles are at least going to give him a shot at receiver. But when you have a guy that size, him being able to break down, get in and out of routes tends to be trouble. But he does a pretty good doing that. But it's about finishing the catch and finishing those contested catch situations that wasn't as good for him. But I think he's a guy that could maybe end up potentially on the practice squad for the Eagles and let him to continue to develop as a receiver and maybe cross-train him as a tight end. And then McMahon, I think kind of the same thing. I think he's probably going to end up being more of a practice squad player as a kind of developmental guy. He's a bit of short arms. He's really athletic. I think that athleticism is really what stuck out in terms of him getting selected by the Eagles. Has some really good testing. His net testing numbers comparable to what Jason Kelsey had coming out of college.
That's yeah. I joked about Dylan after he got on this conference call. Kelsey was 191, Devin, as an athletic center coming out. I wouldn't count on that happening again, but that I don't know if that puts pressure on Dylan McMahon. Johnny Wilson, to your point. At least the Eagles and Howie confirmed that. Nick Sirianni both confirmed that. They're going to start him at wide receiver at least and see what he can do there. And I don't know, Keegan, if it upgrades, but he has tremendous hair, which I'm jealous of. Tremendous hair. So that might upgrade his draft stock. I did want to talk about Hunt. And by the way, Howie added 3 future picks. We got to add that into the mix as well, a 3rd, 4th, and 5th next year. So good haul. The only one I can even nitpick as far as valuation, that type of thing, which is very important to Howie, is Jalix Hunt from the perspective of it's a premium pick, late 3rd round, but still 3rd round. And if you like the player, take the player. I get all that. But I see Peyton Wilson there, and I wanted to get your thoughts on him as a prospect. A lot of injury concerns. Somebody had red flags, but Pittsburgh took him. For people that don't know, I say all the time, Pittsburgh UPMC, that's one of the go-to sports orthopedic places in the entire country. Dr. James Bradley, Dr. Joe Maroon. If those guys clear him, that means something to me. And that's the team that took him, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Your thoughts on Peyton Wilson? Because he could be a day one starter here, in my estimation, Devin.
Yeah, he can. He's a guy that I really like during the draft process and really over the last couple of years. A guy that's really instinctual, able to come downhill, fill those gaps, relentless player. He's going to get in on every single play. He chased down some plays this past season as well, one particularly against Notre Dame that could have been a touchdown that he chased down from across the field. He's the high impact, high effort type of player that you want at the linebacker position, but also can drop into coverage, can get into passing lanes. Had a couple of interceptions this past year as well, pass deflections. They use him as a blitzer coming off the edge, dropped him back into deeper coverage. So he was used all over the place at NC State. And, I know there are concerns obviously about the health. How many times he's been out of the season with injury, the amount of injuries he's dealt with as well. And then his short arms. He has like 31-inch arms that you can kind of shows up sometimes when he's trying to disengage against offensive linemen. But I think if you're asking him to be kind of a off-ball, weak side linebacker, I think it makes a lot of more sense than trying to use him as a true Mike linebacker, and let him kind of more of a free roamer, but also a guy that you can leave on third downs to cover as well, because he has that ability. So, I understand, why the Eagles decide not to draft him. I mean, the injury concerns, you have Nakobe Dean that's dealt with the injury this past year and didn't really play at all as a rookie. You have a couple guys on 1-year deals, Devin White included. So it's certainly a gamble to not take a linebacker within the first 2 days of the draft. But Peyton Wilson, he has a potential to be a really good player if he can stay on the field for the Steelers.
Yeah, and we'll see if he can. His injury history is extensive, but I do agree with Johnny Mack in terms of he could be a day one starter where you take Jalix, and I think you're certain he's not a day one starter, even if he does pan out in the future. Devin, you wrote Quinyon Mitchell. I want to go to our first round pick, the star of the draft for the Eagles, was a slam dunk pick. I want to hear your breakdown of the player, how he fits inside this defense, and how you think he'll be used not only in year one, but beyond, and what type of player he can be in the NFL.
Yeah, slam dunk in terms of value. He's a guy that's supposed to go in the top 10, top 15 even, as a player that should have been the first defensive back off the board way earlier. But obviously we saw the run on offensive players being the first 14 picks of the draft, and that really kind of just changed everything, changed the way that we thought this draft was going to go. Even teams, I bet, the way that it changed as well. But when you look at Quinyon Mitchell, you see a guy that, was 6'1", 195, really physical at the catch point, can mirror routes, can break down and come up and make tackles as well in the open field. And he played on the island at Toledo. They didn't give him safety help. They didn't rotate, coverages towards him. Pretty much most of the time, although it was off man coverage, when he did play man coverage, he was able to hold his own. He didn't give up a touchdown this past season, had 37 pass breakups over the last couple of seasons. So he's a guy that gets his hands on the football early and often, understands route spacing and patterns, ability to kind of recognize that and be able to make plays on the football. Then you take all that skill set and traits to the Senior Bowl and do much of the same thing. Outside of a few reps in those one-on-one sessions at the Senior Bowl, he held his own. He was there step for step with the receivers, turning around when the ball is in the air, being able to locate the football in the air and getting his hands on it. I mean, he's a guy that down the field in those situations, you can feel pretty confident about his ability to, play defense without interfering the receiver. And I think that's such a huge trait to have, especially as a first-round defensive back. So obviously, you're the first DB off the board. He certainly deserves that. Tested like an athletic freak, has good size, good athleticism, and I think he's going to be a really good player for the Eagles. And I think he can slot into that opposite side of Darius Slay. Obviously some training camps battles have to happen. We'll see what happens with James Bradbury, but if you're taking a first-round corner, you're probably going to play him early, and Mitchell certainly is on the track to do so.
Yeah.
John, real quick, just to follow up if I can. How much stock, Devin, do you put into the where Quinyon played in college? A lot of people talk like he played Toledo. He doesn't play great cornerbacks. Is there a acclimation period that's going to happen to acclimate to the level of talent and in the NFL compared to what he was playing versus in the MAC conference?
Yeah, I think at any level, any level of football, even if it's the SEC or Big Ten football, there's a level of acclimation that's going to take place. But really for defensive backs is not only how you can obviously play against NFL level receivers, but having that short-term memory and be able to take some of the good with the bad, take those bad plays and put it behind you. And he seemed to be able to do that ability in a small sample size that you got at the Senior Bowl, where he may have lost a rep, but he came back up at the next one, ready, confident, and went out and won the next rep. So really, it kind of becomes a game for defensive backs, especially where you can't focus too much on where they played at necessarily, although that is a factor, or the kind of the level of competition they're playing. you want to see, are they dominating, and are they shutting people out? And he did that at the MAC level. And then he did the same thing at the Senior Bowl, although those Senior Bowl receivers outside like Ricky Pearsall, most of them were taken on day 2 and day 3 of the draft. So even then, that's still not quite what he's going to see at, the NFL level. But when you look at Toledo's 2022 game against Ohio State, when he went against Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba and those receivers, he did a pretty good job, sticking with Marvin. Although Marvin did score a touchdown, over him, he was right there in the hip pocket. So I think those small sample sizes give you hope for what he can be at the NFL level.
And by the way, great spot for Quinyon as well. He models his game after Slay, and that wasn't sort of hyperbole because he got drafted by the Eagles. He's been talking about that for a while. And Slay himself is sometimes veteran guys don't like to mentor young players, and Slay's the exact opposite because he always gives the vets that were in Detroit a ton of credit for helping him, and he likes to pay it forward. So I think it's a perfect sort of atmosphere for Quinyon Mitchell here in Philadelphia. And that leads us to Cooper DeJean, Devin. Eagles had a first-round grade on him. They would have considered Cooper in the first round, probably would have traded back a little bit if it came to that, tried to work the board that way. But still, they went up and got him. 2 things. Where did you, because he's such a versatile player, where do you project him best as? And can he play in the slot in a consistent basis? Because that would be the easiest path to playing time if he can just play slot corner. And long term, what do you think his best spot is?
Yeah, so this one's a tough one because when I did envision Cooper DeJean getting taken by the Eagles, it was him being one of the only DBs that the Eagles took, in the early rounds. But I think he can play slot. I think, there's some limited, tape of him being able to do so. I do think overall, long-term, probably his best fit would probably be more of a nickel safety hybrid role where, you kind of put him as more of a matchup player on third downs, necessarily as opposed to him being a full-time nickel player, just because I think you can best maximize his abilities as a safety as well, and what he's able to do, kind of move him around. Vic Fangio likes to run those 3 safety sets at times, and I really think he's at his best when he's playing in kind of the off coverage and he's able to drive down the football or drive down on throws, and be able to mirror receivers and take the football away. I think that's when he's at his best. So I do think there's a potential path for him to play nickel, and I think they're going to cross train him, as a potential nickel, potential safety, really kind of get him that full view, that full skill set to understand obviously what the Vic Fangio defense is going to be asking of him, but also the ability to play multiple spots. They picked him to play multiple spots, and I think they'll cross train him as such. But I think he's going to be more of a situational player versus an every down nickel player, if that makes sense. In getting him in certain matchups where you can kind of take away those maybe tight ends or take away some of those bigger wide receivers that move to the slot. So I think there's going to be really a matchup thing with him versus, a guy that you're just going to put in one role and expect him to play one role. Because I can envision a situation where on one play he's playing nickel and in the face of a tight end. Next play he's playing more of that deeper safety coverage and rotates out and plays a deeper zone versus playing up in the box. So I think he certainly has the ability to play nickel, but I could see him being used more in multiple different ways versus just sticking to one position in particular.
I'm going to go to day 3, Devin. We talked about some of the value they got at day 3. It's obviously a depth day. I don't think people go to day 3 and anticipate they're going to get starters or even players that can contribute in year 1. But I thought they did a good job. And one name that sticks out to me and John talked about it a little bit yesterday, is Trevor Keegan, and because of obviously Jason Kelsey left. Now there's it's slated that Tyler Steen will move up into the right guard. Is Trevor Keegan a guy that can challenge him for that, or will they stay with the veteran as the competition there, or how do you think he bodes for the Eagles this year?
Yeah, I think right now I would say I feel pretty confident that Keegan's probably going to be more of a depth guy at the current moment, just because when you take rookies in the fifth round, the expectations aren't as high in terms of them getting a starting spot. Now, if he comes into camp and really crushes it, shows the ability to handle those different types of defensive linemen in terms of the faster, more athletic guys versus the bigger wants to bull rush you type of players, and he shows that ability to be able to handle them consistently, then maybe we could talk about him, pushing Steen for a starting spot. But I think it's all about acclimation early on. In fifth round picks, you typically don't have those high expectations for them to compete for a starting job right away. They took some pretty good capital in Tyler Steen, and obviously they feel pretty confident in him being able to take that next step, that next jump to being a starter at right guard. But I also think they're not going to hand him the starting spot either. So I think Keegan is good in terms of being able to push Steen at that right guard position, just because he has the experience doing so. He's a natural guard as opposed to Steen having to kind of be cross-trained as a guard and tackle. And then Keegan is a guy that makes a lot of sense in the run game. I think he brings a lot more, I would say, in the run game than Steen did coming out. I thought Steen was a little bit more of the pass protector type, more of the can do both at a pretty good level, where I think Keegan is suitable in pass protection, but I think his calling card is going to be playing in a phone booth and playing really well and working downhill in the run game. So I think Keegan is a guy that is going to be ultimately a depth player and probably a backup player early on in at least in this season. But if things really go well for him there in camp and he shows that ability to handle the speed of the game at the NFL level, I'll be surprised if he's pushing Steen seriously for a starting spot by the time we roll around at week 1.
At real D_Jackson. Make sure you follow Devin on X and Twitter. Does a tremendous job. Inquirer.com breaking down the draft. I see it's going to continue. If you want more Devin after the show, he's doing a Reddit AMA. Ask me anything. That's bold, Devin. God bless you. So that's going to be at noon. Yeah, hopefully keep it clean, people. And I want to get in the weeds, though, with you a little bit, and that's the undrafted class. How we mentioned this is the smallest undrafted class. We know of 6 guys so far. He said there were 7, but that may have changed after they signed Mekhi Becton. Couple draftable guys. I'm intrigued by Gabe Hall, most notably. Big, long defensive tackle. It's rare you see a 6'6" defensive tackle who's not, Jordan Davis size. And he's kind of, if anything, undersized. And then the back from Georgia, Kendall Milton. I've always wanted to see a one-cut runner behind this offensive line. The Eagles are always looking for backs who can catch the football. And we all want Christian McCaffrey, but I think behind this offensive line, I would love to see a one-cut guy. Anybody else stand out? And what do you think of those 2 players?
Yeah, so I'll start with Gabe Hall because, I was a guy that I really liked what he did on the first couple of days of Senior Bowl practice. Kind of a guy that I would say is probably a bit of a tweener in the way that he could be used at the NFL level. I don't think he's quite heavy enough to be a consistent interior defensive lineman, nor kind of the height kind of dissuades you from that as well, because he doesn't play with that natural leverage you look for interior defensive lineman. But I think Gabe is a guy that I thought probably could have been drafted and probably a draft and stash type of player. So I think he's a potential candidate for the practice squad and figuring out what to do with him. Because I think there's certainly some intriguing athletic traits with him. Has the size, has the length, has a good swim move and can really be disruptive on rundowns. And then, as a pass rusher, I think he brings you a little bit of juice as well. So I can see him being kind of a potential hand in the dirt defensive end when it's all said and done, just because I think he's not going to, I would say, find a role probably in the interior defensive line necessarily with the Eagles. I think he has a better shot at kind of be more of a hand in the dirt defensive end and kind of coming off the edge that way. So I think Gabe, from that perspective, can do some nice things. And, at the Senior Bowl, they had him playing both interior defensive lineman and as an edge rusher to kind of get teams an NFL look in what he could do in both those areas. Obviously, I talked to him after the first day. He told me he was more comfortable at the 3 tech just because he was used to playing that, especially at Baylor. But I think there's some potential there at moving him as a defensive end. So I kind of like him as a potential practice squad candidate. And then Kendall Milton is, big physical running back that, like you said, is a one-cut runner, gets north and south. And the Eagles really haven't had that type of guy, in a couple of years. Obviously, DeAndre Swift was a really good runner, but more of the guy that wants to get outside and make things happen in the open field. Kendall Milton is a north and south guy. He wants to run through you, run through the line of scrimmage and play more of that power football type. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he looks in this Eagles scheme, especially in the preseason, assuming he gets that opportunity to do so. And I think, with the kind of the lack of depth at running back, maybe he's a guy that, could end up being, practice squad player that maybe you elevate later in the season if he can show kind of the command of the Eagles offense. So, they drafted Will Shipley, but I think he's more of the third down receiving type back. But in terms of Kendall Milton, I think he's more of a guy that you want running the football on first and second down as opposed to going out and catching routes.
Running out of time here on Birds 365, but Devin, I got one last question for you. Ainias Smith, is he wide receiver 3 come week 1?
That's a tough one, just because the rookies.
There's an opportunity.
There's certainly opportunity.
Yeah, there's
certainly opportunity. When you look at Paris Campbell and Devontae Parker, who are also going to be competing for that wide receiver 3 spot, I would say I think there's a better chance that Ainias is going to be a kind of sub-package player as opposed to a true wide receiver 3 early on. Because I think they definitely like his skill set and they want to use that skill set to their advantage. But I think he has to prove that he can be an every down player. Texas A&M kind of used him all over the formation, play some running back, play some slot receiver, kind of a guy that they kind of manufacture touches for. So I would hesitate.
Like Kyle Shanahan guy, not a Nick Sirianni guy.
Yeah. So I'll be hesitant to say he's the wide receiver 3 when it's all said and done at the start of the season. But I do think he's a guy that I could see continue to build trust in the offense if he's able to come through on those third downs and running the correct routes and getting to the correct spots. It's just going to take some time, for him to do so. So I temper day 3 expectations for players just because, there's a reason that they're there and available that late, but I like his skill set. I think he can develop into a really good player and a guy that they use all over the formation and try to win those small one-on-one situations where you can move him around. And he's shown the ability to run routes out of the backfield and shown the ability to run routes as a slot receiver. So I think there's a good chance he's a wide receiver 4 and kind of a sub-package player as opposed to a wide receiver 3.
All right, Devin Jackson.
Tremendous job. Inquirer.com. Make sure you check Devin out and go ask him anything over at Reddit at noon. He's going to have a special chat. Does a phenomenal job covering the NFL draft. Well done, by the way.
Really good work, Devin. I read it all weekend. It was really tremendous work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Devin. Thanks, man, for joining the show. We appreciate it. It was great getting you here to give your thoughts after the draft, and we look forward to talking to you again down the line. All
right. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Devin. Have a good one.
Thanks, Devin.
There's Devin Jackson from the Inquirer. Really good work, Johnny Mac. Really good breakdown of some of the draft picks the Eagles got. And
yeah, he knows his stuff.
yeah, he certainly does. And I love getting into the weeds about players, especially players that the Eagles just got. So we'll come back. We'll wrap up the show. It's a Monday edition after the NFL draft. Beautiful outside today, Johnny Mac. Absolutely beautiful.
It's getting hot. Finally, mid 80s, might even get toward 90.
So
nice.
Good stuff. What's the agenda for the week down at NovaCare? Do you have to go down there today, or
no, nothing today. You never know. Who knows? They might have Mekhi Becton for us, but they haven't officially signed him. He's agreed to terms. He's got to pass his physical. We'll see when that happens. Rookie camp is later this week. Probably not official. Probably going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but not official yet. And you'll get to see a first look at all the new Eagles.
All right, we'll come back. We'll close out the show. We'll give some final thoughts on Monday after the NFL draft. And then we'll prepare for tomorrow on Birds 365 and get ready to break it all down on the week as it kind of settles in. Everybody's still a little bit high on the draft. And John, you're probably on some sort of a work high still where it feels like it's been nonstop. It's almost season-esque where it's a Sunday night game and you're working all day and into the night.
Oh, yeah. It's worse. It's like 3 consecutive Sunday nights.
Yeah, right. So a lot of work from Johnny Mac, a lot of good work from Johnny Mac, and we appreciate his contributions, as I'm sure everybody listening does as well. We'll come back in a minute and we'll close out Monday's edition of Birds 365. Stay tuned.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Closing out a Monday edition of Birds 365, a pretty good draft weekend by the Philadelphia Eagles. John, any closing thoughts before we wrap up this edition of Birds 365. I think we did a pretty good job today hitting on everything the Eagles did this week.
Yeah, we didn't get into enough John Ross talk, but no, I'm joking. He'll be at rookie camp this weekend. Mekhi Becton, yeah, well done by Howie this draft. But I do think, and Devin probably brought a little bit more realistic thought to the day 3 picks. I mean, you're not expecting them to go out and contribute a whole heck of a lot early on, but I do think there's a unique opportunity for 2 players in Aeneas Smith and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And you could argue Trevor Keegan, because Tyler Steen is not entrenched by any stretch of the imagination. And the Eagles certainly wanted to bring in competition, weren't able to in the draft process. Now, I was a little concerned with his take on Smith from the, I hate that term, manufactured touch player, because nobody uses those except Kyle Shanahan correctly.
Yeah, right.
A little bit Andy Reid as well. But certainly the Eagles have shown no evidence. Same thing with Cooper DeJean. Look, Eagles don't do what Devin espoused that you should do. Maybe they will. Maybe it'll change, but they typically don't do it as being a sort of movable piece. I'll believe it when I see it, as they say, if that happens.
And it's not a Vic Fangio thing to do either.
No, historically, he doesn't do that. Now, he does use the 3 safety looks, so that can get him on the field, but essentially – you're playing nickel linebacker at that point. It's not as sexy as it may seem when you phrase it as 3 safety look. You're essentially playing big nickel, as they call it, which is replacing the linebacker with a safety. And that could be his role, but that's not a consistent role. The consistent way to get on the field would be to lock down one of those spots, be it slot corner or safety.
All right, Johnny Mac, we'll wrap up the show. And I thank all of our listeners for tuning in and liking and contributing in the chat room. We appreciate what you guys do on the channel and keeping us going every day and giving us the commentary and the comments and the likes and the subscriptions. And I want to give a shout out, Johnny Mac. We don't talk about this much because we're such a YouTube-based show. Our podcast listeners, our podcast of Birds 365 has amassed over 1 million downloads and continues to get downloads every single day when we post the show as an audio. So a shout out to the podcast listeners. I know you're hearing this if you're listening on podcast, and if you like podcasts, make sure you leave us a review on there and drop us a like on YouTube. So we appreciate all the listeners. Johnny Mac, we appreciate you for your contributions, for all the work you did this weekend, and for breaking it down here on Birds 365. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Thank you, Johnny Mac.
Yep.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.